Okay, good morning, everybody. We got Beta back here. Oh, you're a lot shorter than me. Good morning, everybody. Actually, a lot smaller than me. So we got Beta here from Stonegate Legal. We've had you twice now, and we've done a lot of tenant stuff, and a lot of agents love when you come. So today we decided because the last session you had so many questions on how to qualify tenants. She has an entire presentation on how to qualify. So we kind of briefly went over it at the last presentation. So now we're like, okay, let's bring her back and do this presentation for you guys. And at least it will be recorded so you guys can go back and watch it. It'll be on YouTube and all that.
And you can give everybody the slides.
Yes,
they
and
can
you give the
visit.
slides
Yep.
out. I get your emails now. So there's lots of good resources that you guys will get in her email campaigns alone. I don't know if any of you guys signed up for them last time, maybe. Check your junk if you're not, because they're really informative. But I'm gonna let Beta take over. If you guys online have questions, I'll take a look at the chat. We'll do questions after the session. Maybe if you're in person, maybe we can do them at the same time. But I know you prefer at the end. And I know we get into big discussions typically. So we usually have a lot of questions asked. We have a smaller group today, so it might not be as compact. But if you are online and have questions, just put them in the chat and I will ask them for you. But we will get this started. I think we're all good. Okay.
Perfect.
You are ready. And then you just click the little mousey.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and learn about best legal practices in owning and operating rental property. My name is Bita Delisi. I promise you, you're going to love this type of content. So head over to our social media, like us, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We always tend to provide updates with what's happening in the realm of landlords and tenants. Today, we're going to talk about the top 10 ways or tools that agents can use to pre-qualify prospective tenants for their clients. If you have a smartphone, you can scan that QR code located at the bottom left of your screen to add us in as an automatic contact to your contact list. And if you ever come across a matter where you require some clarity, perhaps you have a question, I always welcome questions. Please feel free to email me, info@stonegatelegalservices.ca. I'm really quick via email, but if you do call our office, you may not get a hold of me because I do a lot of presentations and training sessions for agents, just like this one. You may get one of my team members, all of whom will be happy to assist you. So I'll tell you a little bit about our team. We provide legal support to realtors like yourselves throughout the province of Ontario for your landlord or investor clients, mainly in the areas of non-payment of rent, late payment of rent, lots of cash for keys settlements, owners wanting to occupy their tenanted properties, new purchasers wanting to occupy their newly purchased tenanted property, or defending applications against the landlord brought forward by the tenant. So those are the areas that we mainly provide support. Oh, there we go. Thank you. For the purpose of this presentation, everything we discuss is for information only. Nothing is to be taken as legal advice. If I can kindly ask that you hold all of your questions to the very end, you can type them into the chat box. You can raise your hand at the end of the presentation. We will open up the floor for a Q&A, and you can ask me anything that's landlord and tenant related. So let's talk about pre-qualifying. Okay, show of hands. Who pre-qualifies prospective tenants? Everybody. Okay. So this presentation, it might go one of two ways for you. You may never pre-qualify the prospects.
Meron lang akong webinar, pero it's okay. It's gonna be recorded, so.
Moving forward. Now, but I want to talk about why pre-qualifying prospective tenants. Okay, so first,
Of course.
you can eliminate 99% of headaches by doing the due diligence upfront. That's number one. Pre-qualifying, very important because you eliminate a lot of headaches. Number two, we all know that real estate is the best investment. I'm a landlord myself. I was a former real estate broker. I invest in real estate. I think real estate is the greatest investment. And I also believe that the real investment, because the value of a property increases over time, which we all know, but the real investment is the tenant. You're investing in the tenant. And let me explain why. If you pre-qualify and you attract a good tenant, that tenant is going to make sure that your rent is paid. That tenant is going to make sure that your property is taken care of. Whereas if you find or attract the wrong tenant, now the wrong tenant can make being a landlord a nightmare, which is what we're trying to avoid. And throughout this presentation, we're going to talk about treating this type of ownership of real estate like a business. We're going to talk about your role as a realtor. We're going to talk about your scope of work as a realtor. And we're going to talk about what you can do to assist your clients and limit your liability moving forward. Now, we are going to get into some sort of a great debate at the very end, but that's why it's called, I'm going to say, practicing law, because everybody has a different viewpoint. So let's get started. I always get asked, should a landlord should a buyer purchase a property and put all expenses on the tenant? So oftentimes landlords purchase a property and say, hey, tenant, you have to pay the rent in full and on time. You have to maintain the grounds. You have to cut the grass. You got to shovel the snow, make sure it's salted. Guys, we can't put everything on the tenant. At the end of the day, you own the property. We need to treat real estate ownership for the purpose of rental income as a business. And in business, we're all in business. What happens in business? Sometimes we have losses. Sometimes we have expenses. Sometimes, if we're lucky, we even have profits, right? But we need to treat this type of ownership like a business. And in any business, we're governed by legislation. We're governed by a law. In real estate, you're governed by what? Was RICO Code of Ethics. Now it's TRESA, right? Every type of business has a code of ethics. Lawyers and paralegals were governed by the Law Society Act. Residential tenancy ownership or residential home ownership. You rent it out. The Residential Tenancies Act governs that type of business. And that's exactly what it is. And as a landlord, you need to understand that there are certain obligations, certain responsibilities that you have, not just to the tenant, but towards the law. And that's what we're going to talk about throughout the presentation as well. I always say, at the end of the day, guys, whether you're a landlord, whether you're a tenant, we need to treat our tenants with respect. Because what you put out is what you're going to get in. You heard the saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? That's exactly it. You treat your tenants with respect, they're going to treat you with respect. They're going to treat your property with respect. We have a tenant in one of our properties in Bradford, and they must be paying something like $500 below market value. Okay, it doesn't matter. I don't want to kick them out. They're great tenants. Their unit is spotless. This lady vacuums the common area, mops the common area. They shovel the walkway, and I never asked them to. They do it. They take care of the property. We treat them with respect. Every Christmas, we give them a gift, right? Common courtesy. Never had a problem with these guys. They watch the property like a hawk. If there's a piece of garbage in the back parking lot, they pick it up. We never have to ask once. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. So the tenant is your investment, right? You're investing in the tenant. What's the alternative? I kick them out. I get someone in there who pays market rent, but they're slobs. Is it worth it? I don't know. Depends who you ask, right? And as always, you need a good paralegal on your team. Because I'll tell you, whether it's us you decide to use or somebody else, whether you've owned real estate for 30 years and you've never had a problem, it's inevitable that you're going to run into a problem. So make sure that you have a reliable source a trusted source, an experienced source, someone who does this for a living, right? You don't go to a dentist and say, hey, my stomach hurts, right? It's not the right doctor to treat your stomach ache, right? To provide you with support. So make sure you're treating real estate rental properties like a business. And that's exactly what you should be telling your clients. Okay, let's dive into the presentation. What is the scope of work of a realtor? What's your scope of work? When they hire you to list the property for rent, what's your scope of work? Is your scope of work to seek out a AAA tenant? Well, what's a AAA tenant? I don't know what a AAA tenant is. Is your scope of work to obtain an offer for lease? Is it to pre-qualify prospective tenants? Is it to conduct due diligence, call references, verify income? Let's dive deeper. Because right when I asked what's your scope of work, half of half of the team here went, I don't know. I'm making you doubt yourselves. This is not for you guys to doubt yourselves. No, this is to inform you, empower you, so you can move forward with confidence when you're dealing with people out there. So let's talk about it. Show of hands. Percy's not here. Claire's not.
coming.
Oh, okay.
He's almost
Before he gets here, who has actually read the listing agreement authority to offer for lease? Should I ask her to leave? Right? Form 272. When you go to a presentation, or maybe you don't go to a presentation, when you meet with a landlord and you say, landlord, I need you to sign this listing agreement so we can put it on the MLS for lease. What are you getting them to sign? Do you even know what you're getting your clients to sign? Maybe. Have you read it? Be careful.
I read it with them.
You read it with them. Okay. Perfect. So one. Okay, this is good. Oh, there he is.
You're just
Good
looking at
morning. No, everyone just put their hands down when you came in. Let's move forward though. He didn't see. Let's talk about the agent's scope of work. When you go to a property and you say, hey, landlord, I need you to sign the MLS listing agreement, authority to offer for lease, because I'm going to go back, get my deal secretary to broker load it. What is your scope of work? What are they hiring you to do? My friend here, you've read it. What are they hiring you to do? Be careful, Claire's listening.
Well, I mean, it's everything that you listed there, right? We're representing them.
Negative. Anybody else? That's correct. Listing and marketing. Well, I put it here anyway, so. But that's what they're hiring you to do. They're hiring you to list and market their property. They would hire you to list and market their property when you're listing the property for sale. Same goes here. I really encourage everybody here to go back and read clause number 11. It's very important because that is where your scope of work is defined. Let's move forward. Let's talk about that because what we do is out of courtesy. We vet prospective tenants out of courtesy to our clients. Do we not? I used to. You don't vet prospective tenants?
I don't think that's like the expectation.
It is. But what happens when things go wrong?
You get blamed.
Right. Have you ever been unlucky to get a lawsuit against you? No. So this is going to help you. So let's talk about that. In your MLS listing agreement, in order to safeguard yourself, because you don't need protection until you need protection, right? When something goes wrong. I mean, something could not go wrong. Who knows? But for clarity, there should always be a Schedule A, which outlines the scope of work. What am I going to be doing? I'm going to be calling references. I'm going to be asking them to sign a rental application so that we can pull a credit report. Details, because when things go wrong, they always point the finger at you. And I'm going to tell you where you can get a schedule that you can add to the listing agreement, provided that Claire reviews it and he's okay with it. This way you protect yourselves and you protect the brokerage. Because if things go wrong, and we're going to talk about one incident at the very end, we're going to talk about a case law where one agent was not very lucky and things went wrong. So it's very important to safeguard yourselves. Let's talk about the top 10 tools or ways to pre-qualify. Number 10, make your rental property look a certain way. Who's ever done online dating? All right, pick on my friend here. Okay, so what do? You go online, you go to, I don't know, singlepeople.com, whatever it is, and you scroll. What are you looking for? You're looking for, I'm hoping, you're looking for someone who's well put together, someone who's clean cut, someone who is attractive, right? You're not going to look for a slob. The hair is 5 different colors. I don't know, she's got a beard or whatever the case is. You're going to look for someone or something.
No visible tattoos.
That's right. There you go. Preference, right?
Preference.
So why are we not doing this when we are listing our properties for rent? What do you go when you go on a listing presentation, you're selling a $2 million property. What do you tell your client? Make it look great. I'm here to sell. I'm not here to just put on the market and let it gather dust. In fact, one step further, if they have kids and they draw on the walls, what do you say? Paint is the most cost-effective tool you can use. Not only does it give it a nicer look, it freshens the space. So why are we not doing this with our rental properties? Guys, I see so many pictures on MLS that the floors, you walk in, there's a ceramic with laminate floors followed by hardwood that's buckling and then carpet. Why? Because a lot of landlords take the position that it's a rental property. Who cares? It's a tenant. Who cares? No, guys, we have to change our mindset. We need to attract, remember, garbage in, garbage out, right? Garbage out, garbage in. You're selling a product. You're going to attract a certain tenant if the property looks a certain way. Just like you may attract multiple offers on a property that is showcased, looks good. So why are we not using this when we're listing a property for rent? We need to raise our expectations. Not only change our mindsets as realtors, as landlords, but we need to change our clients' mindsets. In this day and age, to ask for $4,000 for a detached home that looks like a mess, what type of tenant do you think you're going to attract? And that's what you need, exactly. That's what you need to ask yourselves. So we need to make the property look a certain way. Number 9, ask questions. Who's ever heard of the term, the squeaky wheel gets the oil? Right. You know, I have these clients all the time where the clients call you 100 times and ask you the same questions. We've all had that clients. We all have that annoying clients, right? The squeaky wheel gets the oil. When I first started my career in real estate, I'm going to age myself, 22 years ago, I used to, when the internet wasn't internet presence, I used to go, no word of a lie, I used to go to the Toronto Star. Back then they had by the bus stops, the Toronto Star newspapers. I used to grab them and I used to go to the classifieds and I used to call the for sale by owners. Every Saturday morning, like clockwork, I used to do that, call the FSBOs, make appointments for the week, go in and try to convert those FSBOs into listings. And I was in my early 20s. And it wasn't working for me. So I went to my broker and I said, broker, what am I doing incorrectly? I'm consistent. I do my follow-ups. I make my calls. I go to the properties. What am I doing wrong? And at the time he said, you need to put them through a process of disqualification. Disqualify them over the phone. Separate the tire kickers from the ones that are serious. Ask questions. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. So I developed a series of questions, and I brought those questions into my business as a landlord. And these are the questions that I ask prospective tenants. Hey, tenant, what is your income? How many people will be occupying the rental unit? Do you have any pets? Why is this question important? Well, firstly, if you're renting at a condominium, you have to look at the rules related to pets. The condo may not allow for animals. Exempt, obviously, service pets or service animals are exempt, but that's why you need to ask. Hey, prospect, are you a smoker or non-smoker? Well, why is that question important? Well, don't you think it's important for the landlord's insurance company to know whether that tenant is a smoker or non-smoker? Why are you moving? Legit question. Prospect, why are you moving? In a high rental market where rents are $3,000, $4,000 a month, why are you moving? How is your credit? You don't tell me the truth, I'm going to find out anyways. I'd rather you tell me and then I'll confirm it when I find out. These are the process of disqualification. Ask the right questions. Don't ask questions just to ask questions. You need to ask good quality questions. Let's move on. Number 8, call references. Who does that? Excellent. Excellent. This is good. This is good. I call anyone. As long as they're listed as a reference, I'm calling them. Because once I have that person on the phone, you can find out a lot about someone, right? I don't care if it's their mother, their father, their brother, sister, it doesn't matter. In fact, you would be surprised as to how many parents would tell you, I would never rent to my son. Be surprised. And that should raise an eyebrow. But the person you should be calling, the first person you should be calling is their previous landlord, not their current landlord, because their current landlord will tell you whatever to get them out. That's right. They're great. Their previous landlord has no ties to them. And you need to ask them good quality questions. Number 1, why did the tenant move? Number 2, has the rent been paid in full and on time for the last consecutive 12 months? Number 3, previous landlord, would you rent to them again? It's a great question, right? Why or why not? Were there any extensive or intentional damages after they moved out? Good quality questions. Who calls personal references? I love personal references. Remember, the purpose of a personal reference is to get an idea as to what their character is like. Okay, so mother, father, brother, sister, friend, aunt, uncle. What type of person is Katelyn? Right? Does she like to party? Does she like to smoke? What is she? Does she have a pet? Tell me about her. I want to know. I want to know. Is she responsible? Was there ever a time that you loaned her $100 or $50 and she never repaid you? I'm going to pick on you today. Would you rent to her again? Guys, I tell you, if her mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, best friend, if they say, I would never rent to her, it would raise an eyebrow. Mind you, when you're asking that, you would ask, why? Why wouldn't you rent to her? You're getting to know what Katelyn is like. Remember, when you're having a tenant move in, it's like you're marrying that person. And sometimes a lot worse than marrying that person, because that divorce can be a hell of a lot more expensive. Let's move on. Just hold questions. Number 7, analyze credit report. Credit report is very, very important because it gives you a financial synopsis, or not even financial, a synopsis of their financial responsibility. I've always been a huge fan of Equifax. And that's because, if Equifax is acceptable by banks, surely it's acceptable to rent out the $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 unit. In fact, I always tell agents, guys, don't just focus on the beacon score. Look at the entire credit report. Look at the activity. Are they paying off their credit card loans? Are they paying them in full? Are they paying them on time? Have there been any bankruptcies? I'll tell you, there's a lot of fraudulent credit reports where fraudsters, and they do a really good job, I have to say, they manipulate the credit score and they don't touch anything else because they know that often agents just focus on the credit score and that's it. So I've seen fraudulent credit reports that say, I don't know, 705 beacon score. But you know, on the side of it, it has a little arrow where it says poor, good, great. The arrow is on poor. Well, how could you have a 706 beacon score with the arrow being poor? That's right. Photoshop. Make sure you're analyzing the credit report in its entirety. Don't just focus on the beacon score. You're going to miss a lot of things. And I'll tell you, once they're in, getting them out or placing the blame on the agent, very easy. Let's move on. Income verification. Who gets that? Who gets something in writing verifying income? Good. We should all be doing that. Now, I have to say that when I look at MLS listings for lease, there's a lot of agents that put in their letter of employment required, right? That is, you're opening up yourselves to not only a RICO complaint, but a human rights complaint. And I'll tell you, the Human Rights Tribunal is one tribunal that we all want to stay away from. Let me explain why. In your MLS listings for lease, you should be asking for confirmation of source of income. Employment is just one source of income. There's tons of other sources: alimony, child support, investments, pension, Ontario Works, Ontario Disability. These are all different sources of income. Employment is just tip of the iceberg. So we need to change our wording, again, to protect from being sued, not only via RICO, but via the Human Rights Tribunal. Let's move on. Once you have that proof of income, we all have the internet at our fingertips. Why are we not searching the credibility of that company? So by this slide and going down, you now have documentation that you can do your due diligence. Does that company exist online? It's very, very rare that in this day and age that a company doesn't exist online, right? Is Katelyn, the HR manager, online as she is on paper? Is the company phone number the same online as it is on paper? We have to verify. If you're going to undertake to pre-qualify, you have to make sure that you pre-qualify. Now, if the prospect is self-employed, this becomes a little bit more difficult because they kind of control their income. Now, I sometimes, for my own properties, I ask for a bank statement. Can you provide at least 6 months bank statement that shows, I don't care what you spend your money on, that shows consistent regular income or payment of your rent due on the 1st or whenever it's due consistently? And sometimes tenants say, well, I don't have to show you that. And they're right, they don't have to show me that. But there's no other way to verify for a self-employed person. Oftentimes, they say, yeah, no problem. I'll just black out everything else. I can show you the rent is paid on time on the 1st for 6 months. And I'm fine with that. If you have a tenant or prospective tenant on Ontario Works or Ontario Disability, and I want to talk about this a little bit because oftentimes landlords think it's guaranteed rent, right? Nothing in life, guys, is guaranteed because that prospect can go to Ontario Works or Ontario Disability and say, I no longer want you to pay the landlord directly. I want to self-direct my rent to me. On the flip side, I have landlords who say, I will never rent to anyone on Ontario Works or on disability. And that's not right either. I've had personally my own tenants. I've had some people that are on disability and the rent is paid on like clockwork. They take care of the property. And then I've had to evict head of anesthesiology department in a very predominant hospital. I've evicted broker of records. I've evicted hockey players. It doesn't matter how much money they make. You need to pre-qualify properly. It's kind of like economies of scale, right? The more you make, the more you spend. One of my team members, Andrew, yesterday evicted a tenant who owed $40,000, but he drove a Lamborghini. Right? So make sure when you're pre-qualifying, you don't judge that person on the income that they have. You judge them on their ability, their responsibility, how responsible they are in making their payments on time. Keyword, on time. Let's talk about reference letters. Who asked for reference letters? Good, good. Oftentimes agents say, well, I don't ask for reference letters because anyone can draft a reference letter. And you're right. Anyone can draft a reference letter. And we do over 1,000 cash for keys every year where the tenants agree to vacate. Some are good tenants, some are not good tenants, but they ask for reference letters. And of course, we can't provide a reference letter and say something that's not truthful. So I want you to be able to see through the lines. I'm going to give you an example of wording in reference letters. The first thing you're going to pay attention to is the wording. A reference letter that says, the rent is paid in full and on time. Dear landlord, Katelyn has been a tenant at this property for such and such time, 5 years. The rent is paid in full and on time. What does that mean? It means she pays the rent in full and on time, right? All agree? So what I really want you to pay attention to is the second sentence, which would be an entirely different reference letter. Katelyn has been a tenant in such and such property. She has lived here for 5 years. There are no monies owing with respect to this tenancy. What does this mean? Does this mean that she pays the rent in full and on time? No. I mean, it could, but why wouldn't they just say she pays the rent in full and on time? Which you should be asking questions. Landlord, did you do a cash for keys forgiveness? Did you waive $20,000 that she owed and now there are no monies owing with respect to this tenancy? Right? What happens if you go back to your landlord and say, landlord, she's a AAA tenant, you should accept her. There are no monies owing with respect to her current tenancy. And then she moves right in, she stops paying the rent. Landlord will come to you and say, well, Claire, you told me she was good. You told me she was AAA. She's not paying the rent. Make sure you pay attention to the wording in your reference letters. In fact, guys, if you receive something that you're not sure, scan and send it to me. Hey, Vita, can you take a look at this for me? Easy. You're doing your due diligence. You're creating a paper trail for your client. Because in the event your client goes to RICO or your client goes to civil court, and they say, well, agent didn't do their job. Well, yes, I did. I got my reference letter, sent it to a paralegal. This is what the paralegal said. And then you decided to do this. I did my due diligence. Number 4, internet search. Who's ever Googled themselves? Everybody has. Come on. Okay. So if you ever Google yourself, you will see that so much information comes up. Your social media links, if you've ever had any criminal articles against you or whatever, allegations, if there's anything out there that exists, sometimes it pops up online. So why are we not doing a Google search for our tenants? Why not? At this point in the due diligence process, you can confirm the documents you have in front of you. Are there any news articles? Do they have a criminal background? Now, you can't do a criminal check, but sometimes criminal background checks are public and you can find them online. Just like landlord and tenant board orders, they are public and you can do them and you can search online. Number 3, social media. Everybody has social media nowadays. Sometimes the older generation does not. But the younger generation does. And if you do an internet search, their social media links will come up. And you can search them because, guys, social media is our life on the internet. Everything good we want people to see on the internet. By this stage, you have the rental application. They've answered the question as to whether or not they have a pet, whether or not they have children, who's going to be occupying the rental unit. You've done your reference check, so you probably have a good idea of what that person is about. Now it's time to verify using social media. So if Katelyn says in my rental application, I don't have a dog, and then I go to her Instagram and there's like 100 pictures of her with a little Shih Tzu, hold on a second. Am I not going to verify? Hey, Katelyn, on your application, you said this, but I have another source that shows that you have a dog. Now, her dog could have passed away or whatever the case is, but you need to verify that. Hey, Katelyn, you're applying for a condominium. The condo doesn't allow for pets. I notice on your social media you have a dog. Can you please verify? Because I cannot rent this unit to you if you have a pet. The condominium will not allow it. What happens if you don't do that? If you sign a lease with her, she makes arrangements to move in. Maybe she does move in. And then you receive a letter from the condominium board's legal team that says, hey, Claire, your tenant has a pet. Get rid of your tenant or get rid of your pet. He can't just block her out. Now he has to file an application with the board and commence a legal proceeding, which is a headache. Do we have any mutual friends? It's a good thing if you do, because I would contact a mutual friend. Hey, Claire, I noticed we have Katelyn as a mutual friend on Facebook. What do you know about her? How do you know her? Would you rent to her if you were me? Then it's a third party. You have somebody else that you can ask questions and find out more about Katelyn. Tenant screening services, number 2. Guys, full disclosure, I've never used a tenant screening service. I've always been able to pre-qualify my own tenants personally because of my real estate background. But there are tenant screening services that often landlords engage to acquire a tenant. Now, just remember, if you're going to use, or if your clients are going to use a service, that service is not going to meet with the tenant. That service can only judge them based on what they have in front of them at the time. That's why, in my opinion, the best tenant screening service provider is, in fact, the realtor, because the realtor would have gathered all of that information. But services like from a property manager or single key or front lobby or rent check can be engaged to acquire a tenant. That doesn't mean that if that tenant stops paying, you can now go after them. No. I'm sure they have a very, very strong legal team with very, very strong contracts. So there are tenant screening services out there. And if you want to use them, you can. If you're going to be using a realtor, that realtor, you guys, should include in a Schedule A exactly what your job or your scope is. And oftentimes I get asked, is there a bad tenant list? We should be able to go to a directory and list all of the bad tenants. Unfortunately, there's no bad tenant list. So I mentioned earlier on that landlord and tenant board orders are now public. And landlords can go to openroom.ca. It's a great website. Who's ever heard of openroom.ca? Oh, okay. Okay, so many of you haven't. Openroom.ca is great because you can go on openroom.ca. Any landlord in the province of Ontario can go to this website and upload a landlord and tenant board order. Okay, so I'm going to go up there and I'm going to upload my order saying that Katelyn has been evicted because she owes me $25,000. Katelyn goes to Claire and she says, Claire, I'm a AAA tenant. Here's my paperwork. And Claire goes, I attended Vita's presentation and I'm going to go to openroom.ca and I'm going to search Katelyn Fulton in that keyword search. And any order that's been uploaded by any landlord in the province of Ontario that has those keywords, that order will pop up. Is that not a great tool for Claire to judge if he's going to take Katelyn on? Absolutely. Now, I think there's about 25,000 orders already uploaded to openroom.ca. Now, I mentioned OpenRoom is a public website. Canley.org is not a public website. Same concept, but Canley.org is provincially, I want to say, monitored. And in August of 2020, landlord and tenant board orders were becoming public. So the province would actually upload some of them to Canley.org. I always recommend that you do search both websites because maybe an order will come up on OpenRoom that doesn't come up on Canley. Maybe an order will come up on Canley that doesn't come up on OpenRoom. But by far, guys, this is the best traditional tool to pre-qualify prospective tenants. I'll tell you from my experience, I had a tenant file an application for a rental unit for one of my own buildings, and I was able to pull up four orders from OpenRoom that 4 previous landlords had uploaded. I encourage all landlords to upload their orders onto openroom.ca.
Vita, I got called into something that says on these guys
Mhm.
video. You've uploaded this tenant, and I just visited this tenant in another location. This is the video I sent you.
I uploaded
Yeah,
Vita
see, Terrence Fong and Wanda Fong, they're my clients. I didn't put them there.
Yeah. So our team uploaded. Yeah, we upload majority of our orders onto OpenRoom. And that's great. Did it not help you?
I'm just seeing it.
Oh,
now.
you just saw it now.
I'm helping the landlord. Be fine.
Gotcha.
Helping them get rid of these guys
Gotcha.
so I can sell the place. And I just showed her the video.
Yeah.
The place is disgusting.
That's
Yeah. See, the internet is great.
So if you
Definitely use. That's right. But if the landlord found out before, he would not have rented.
Like a hero of my client. Though.
That's right.
So,
Absolutely you are.
2021. You said COVID.
So probably around that
COVID
time.
sometime.
Or maybe 2020.
Yeah, wow.
But let's talk about the risks. What are the risks involved in owning rental properties? Because non-payment of rent is just the tip of the iceberg. Like I said, you can have a tenant that pays the rent like clockwork. Then you have other problems. Tenant is late. There's damages. They bring in other occupants, guests, roommates. They maybe move out and leave those occupants or roommates behind. They're not cooperative when you want to show the property, when you want to get an appraiser in, right? They interfere with showings. They restrict showings. They deny showings. They bring in pets that are dangerous. They smoke in the property. I had a tenant that we had to evict. The tenant was a tenant for 25 years. He smoked in the property so much that the walls were yellow. Disgusting. So, but he paid the rent for the last 25 years, never missed the rent payments. So there are risks involved. We should be telling our clients non-payment of rent is just the tip of the iceberg. Let's talk about case law because I said we would talk about case law. This case law, Carola v. VIP Realty Inc. This was dated January 22, 2025. The plaintiff, Miss Carola, is the owner of the property in Cumberland. She entered into a lease agreement with tenants who unfortunately caused very significant damage to the property. Ms. Carola filed a claim alleging that the defendant's real estate agent and brokerage, remember I said, what you guys do out there falls on the brokerage here, were negligent because they failed to adequately identify and vet the tenants they recommended to Ms. Carola. Now, Claire, I know you like case law, so if you want me to send this over to you, definitely send this over to you.
Good one.
All right, let's see. Here are the facts, okay? The realtor represented the landlord in listing her property for rent. The personal defendant, so the realtor, introduced 2 prospective tenants to the landlord. Nothing wrong with that, right? The realtor did not meet with the prospective tenants herself, nor did she attend the property with them for showings, which is common. Listing agent doesn't meet the tenant or their agent at the property, correct? Common. Let's move forward. She provided the plaintiff with a family photograph of the tenants as well as some bank statements. She advised that all necessary background checks had been completed, but she did not provide copies of the tenants' rental applications or their identifications. She told the landlord that she would be lucky to have these individuals as tenants. Guys, be careful what you say. Be careful what you put in a text message. Be careful what you put in an email. When you're vetting prospective tenants, because when you're doing it based on the information that is provided to you at the time that it's provided to you, right? Let's move on. The landlord's property was ultimately rented to these tenants in or about August 2020. Here were the issues that immediately arose. Number 1, in October 2020, the tenants broke a lock and cut the wires to the building's security system. Police were called, but the police really don't do anything because their role is to keep the peace. In November 2020, the landlord began eviction procedures with the landlord and tenant board. Well, on or about that time, the board had incurred anywhere, I think it was about 80,000 applications. Remember, COVID time, 80,000 applications, and there were no in-person hearings. Hearings were put online, but because of all of the backlog, the matter wasn't heard as quickly as she wanted. However, in December 2020, the landlord discovered, sorry, I'm going to go back. In late 2020, the tenants began harassing the landlord. She feared for her and her family's safety. In December 2020, the landlord discovered that the tenants had provided fraudulent identification when they entered into the lease agreement. She also learned that at least one of the tenants had a lengthy criminal record, including for growing marijuana in other rental properties. She contacted the police. In December 2020, the landlord filed a complaint against the realtor with RICO. On May 19, 2021, RICO found that the realtor had failed to meet relevant real estate standards. In March 2021, the tenants were arrested and charged with fraud and forgery. But wait, there's more. In July 2021, the tenants vacated the property. The landlord says she did not discover the extent of the physical damage until she accessed the property in July 2021. The interior of the home was destroyed. It required major repairs, and the damage was so severe that the residence was not livable or rentable. The notice of action was filed on June 23, 2023. Ms. Carola claims damage in the amount of almost $200,000. The realtor accepts that they owe a duty of care to the landlord. For a more comprehensive copy of this order, please send me an email. The realtor was fined. The brokerage was fined. And the brokerage had to let that realtor go because that person was too much of a liability. Guys, this is real life case law. Please make sure that you cover yourselves, that you cover the brokerage. What you guys do out there falls on the broker here. We're almost at the end of the presentation. I said two things. One of two things might happen. You may not touch leases or you may do it with care. But if you already haven't done so, head over to landlordmastery.ca. You can download your free copy of the Landlord Mastery Guide, which gives you access to our Google Drive. And in that Google Drive, you can download scripts, forms, the most updated Ontario Standard Lease. It's a great guide. You can use it in your business. You can give away the guide to your clients. Absolutely free, and it's a great resource. This is our newest guide. It's called sellwithtenants.ca. It's actually a toolkit that agents can use in order to sell a property that's tenanted or list for lease a property that's tenanted. This gives you access to another Google Drive where you can download a pre-listing checklist, a 24-hour notice, clauses that you can include, of course, get the okay from Claire in your agreement of purchase and sale, scripts, notices. It's another great guide, sellwithtenants.ca. And who's going to Realtor Quest? Everybody should be going to Realtor Quest. Excellent. May 14 and 15. I will be speaking on both days. Please come and say hello. Attend the speakers session as well. Two great new presentations. And if you come to our booths, we'd love to see you guys. Come and say hello. And here we are at the end of the presentation. I hope you found it informative. And I hope you learned something. And let's open up the floor for a Q&A. You want to do the
chat here?
Sure.
And then you can do in person.
Sure.
So quick question just about, at one of your last slides, you say stick to your scope of work. So going back to the agreement in place, the scope of work is marketing, right? The property, right? Listing and marketing. So what do you mean by stick to the scope of work? Are you saying don't do due diligence, don't do any of that? Because
So-
officially, our scope of work is not that.
Right. So your scope of work is to list and market, and your clients have to be aware of that. Okay. If you're going to be doing due diligence, there should always be a Schedule A that outlines exactly what you're doing. Okay. If you choose to do due diligence, I have agents that say, you know what, I don't even touch doing due diligence. I just get the Form 400, an offer to lease. I show it to my client, and my client does the due diligence. So it's really up to you, agent, how you want to lead. Do you want to do the due diligence? If so, you should disclose exactly what you're doing.
So in case of that, in that case law situation, had there been a Schedule A that said, I'll do due diligence, I'll check ID, would that then not have been a suable situation then, because they had it in the schedule, or?
So I don't know, because what the facts were that I showed you, it's a 7-page order. I can send you the order. Could it have changed the agent's liability? It may, right? We don't know. But it will definitely limit your liability, because it says, I did this, this, and this. I called the references. I asked these questions. These are my notes. This is what they told me, right? I obtained a reference letter. I called Claire on such and such date. This was what I asked him, and this is what he told me. At least you have a paper trail of what you did to conduct due diligence, right? Remember, when a matter goes to the court, it's not that, oh, she stopped paying rent, right? I have to sue the agent. No, anyone can stop paying rent. What actions did you take, agent, to pre-qualify her? Well, I did this, this, and this, and this. This is what I did.
So diarize.
100%. 100%.
More than the scope of work.
Well, you need to outline your scope of work, and then you should be noting everything that you've done. And then initially at the very end, it should be the client saying, I want Katelyn. You should never say, she's a AAA tenant. You should take her. You don't know what'll happen. I'm relying on you, agent, because you do a lot more of this than I do. We should always be careful what we say. They hang on to that one thing that we say.
Mhm.
That's it.
In all cases.
That's right.
A lot of the liability then of the agent.
A disclaimer won't save you 100%.
to put it forward to the voters that the agent is only going to provide the information, that then it's solely up to you to choose the.
Well, then you don't need a disclaimer because in the MLS listing agreement, that's your scope of work.
But initially you said it was just a market
That's correct.
and bring the people together. To me, that's the job, is to bring people together, and then they.
You do your due diligence, landlord.
Pardon?
You say, this is the offer, this is offer number 1, offer number 2, offer number 3. Landlord, you do your due diligence. Now, sometimes what they say is, well, realtor, what am I paying you commission for?
Bring the people together.
That's correct. My job is to list and market. How do you think you got 3 offers?
That works well with a property management company. So I represent a lot of leases in multiple buildings and I just send it to them, but their property management does it. Most of you guys are probably working with like mom and pop type landlords, which they rely heavily on us.
Yeah.
So that's where you guys have to decide if you want to take that type of responsibility or not.
And that's why I say be careful what you say because they only hear what they want to hear.
Yeah.
She's a AAA tenant. Well, you told me she was a AAA tenant. That's why I took her. You're right.
Because you kicked the dog? Okay.
Don't know where that's going. So so on the Schedule A, we can identify maybe what services we're going to provide. Again, to Linda's comment, like, can we identify what the landlord's responsibility is? Ultimately, the decision for approval is the landlord's.
You can, if you're going to put together a Schedule A, I always say, always get it cleared by your broker of record. Right? Before
Well,
you
sure.
get them to sign it.
But I'm just wondering, like, you know, if so your presentation was very informative. There's lots of quite simple ways we can dig deeper into the background of a prospective tenant. So if we go to that trouble and provide that information to the landlord, can we once again in the Schedule A identify the fact that yes, we'll give this to you, but it's up for you. to
You
be satisfied
decide.
by it and you decide.
Absolutely. But the wording of that, you may want to get it cleared.
It's not-
Claire's shaking his head.
It's not a-
I don't like you writing the law. The law already says right there what your
Yeah.
scope is. So why rewrite it again? It's already there. You read the contract to the client before they signed it. So what more?
It already says that you're not responsible for
I'm
that.
responsible. It says nothing. No, I'm not responsible for anything.
Okay, so to Beta's point, then we could identify what.
But if you go outside the bounds of the contract and you start pre-qualifying these people, which is outside your scope, now you're gonna have to cover this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So if you're representing the client, I'll screen your people for you. You better say it's still his responsibility for all of it.
That's my point. So
But if you're gonna go outside the scope of the contract, then.
if the contract says listing and marketing, and that's it basically, but then we decide to offer a premium landlord renting service.
So you gotta say, like, I suggest you do it a single key here. Anybody?
Yeah, I've used it.
You've done it or your client?
I did.
That's not,
So the client should be doing it.
Yeah.
that's not. Fine.
I did it
My
and
aunt-
offered it to the client to decide. I didn't decide.
Anyway, so bottom line is the client has to, clients. Saying that, we've got three qualifications, 3 tenants, which one you pick one, not you pick one.
Right. Yeah, no, I don't want to pay.
Mhm.
So again, no, her world is all lawsuits, okay? Our world, we do 89 cases a month. I have 1 lawsuit in 10.
Right.
Okay, so just don't get too excited about what's going on. So we do anything that makes sense.
And if you're not sure, ask. Don't just do.
Oh, we do.
Good, good. Then you're on the right track.
See how tired he looks?
Just, you know, we have 1 lawsuit going on right now where we're being sued, similar thing, somebody wrecked the place and then, but in this case here, it's where every case is separate and different. They were paying rent for 2 years and they stopped paying rent for, and all of a sudden it's our fault for putting in a deadbeat.
Yeah. I guess ultimately my question is about, is there an opportunity to provide, I know we do a lot of leases here in the office, but is there an opportunity to provide a more premium landlord, service, like a premium service to landlords.
Doing that already.
Well,
You're saying, should we guarantee this tenant?
no, I'm not saying that.
I
But
feel like,
let-
yeah, if you increase your fees a little bit more, that opens you up for even more trouble. Because now you're like really holding yourself to a
Because
standard.
I get the listing and marketing, wash your hands, I don't know if that's all I did, it's kind of a. You know what I mean, like, so if you ratchet that service up to a prospective, to a client of yours. In the act of helping them find a tenant.
So as long as you gather data, do the Equifax, say this, like you're gathering all the paperwork for them.
Let them decide.
Like, if you follow all the steps that Peter identified and went through the 10 things and did the social media search, the internet Google search, all of those bits. I mean, that seems like a pretty comprehensive
So what,
snapshot.
so the suggestion is, if you're gonna be doing all this, if you're gonna be phoning the board, phoning the past landlord, you want to document all this, it's something you're doing over and above,
Right.
not guaranteeing that.
Not guaranteeing
So it's tenants in these cases think that because we're gonna pay 1 month's rent, we're guaranteeing.
Yeah.
For the property.
right,
And that's exactly what landlords think too. I'm
Yeah.
paying you to get me a AAA tenant.
sure,
How do I know the guy's not gonna lose his job in 3 months and stop paying rent?
problem, we should list it back.
So the answer to your question would be on your schedule A, if you're concerned about that, saying my job is only to bring a tenant, your job is to follow.
That is great to say.
So you've got some online questions. Clients had a tenant that brought in a dog after saying they didn't have one. Dog was barking, building got involved. They were told to get rid of the dog or move out. They decided to move out. After using his last month's rent, he was there for 3 months only, so the landlord took the hit, losing current month's rent and potentially more real estate fees and cleaning fees. The priority of getting him out was done. Do they have recourse? And if so, how to proceed? Like against the tenant, I assume.
Didn't the landlord tell them to leave?
Yeah, I guess they want to get that month's rent
Right.
back plus the commission plus cleaning fees.
So if it was a mutual agreement to end the tenancy, then that's the cost of doing business, landlord.
It's nice that he moved out though.
I got lucky.
Personal references are the same as current landlord scenario. No, they'll select their favorite personal references.
In fact, the first question, just for clarification.
Yeah.
The reason why they got rid of dogs because the building didn't allow pets, right?
The dog was barking a lot and then the building probably got annoyed.
So let's say the building does allow pets, remember it says no pets.
Yeah.
And you move in and then landlord finds a pet, I think it's so sad for them.
Usually, but if it's disruptive to the condo, then maybe there's a little bit more rules.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, disruptive or nuisance, you have to go through a legal procedure.
Yeah.
If somebody says that there's no dog on the application, also for the dog, it's so sad.
You can't do anything.
Sad.
I've got a nice golden retriever living at mine right now.
Question, hi. In terms of, you were mentioning somewhere to check the reference from the previous landlord. I always tell, based on the 18 years of experience, I tell them that's sort of like BS reference, because if the tenant is good, they're gonna say good. If he's bad, which landlord is gonna give a bad reference for a tenant that they wanna give you?
She said
Previous.
previous,
Not
not
the
current.
Previous.
Use like two.
They already moved out
Landlord that.
2 landlords ago,
Yeah.
because they'll tell you the
Right,
truth.
right, no, you're right. That's why I say, why are you calling the current? The current one will say, oh, she's been great. Meanwhile, she has owes them $20,000.
Go to the one before.
And then another question, regarding bad faith that all these tenants attempt to learn and they attempt to use. When you want to kick them out of the place for, I guess the reason of you sold the property and you say that the new purchaser wants to move in. And of course you have to get, is it affidavit or they have to
A
sign
declaration?
declaration that we have a case right now that I asked the new purchaser to sign it, and it's like, I'm not gonna sign it, it's your responsibility to give me vacant position. Because
So what's in your offer?
my offer is vacant position.
Congratulations.
No, I know, but I'm saying if this guy.
Claire?
says You want a vacant position, but I'm not gonna. approve that.
I've heard this.
Oh, okay.
He's trying to get a different answer right now.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, verbal's verbal.
You have to be careful when you're drafting these offers and when a buyer is purchasing a tenant's property, you have to ask them, what is your intent? Are you going to be moving in? Because based on what they tell you is the clause that you use.
At the beginning, they say vacant possession and
Well, then you have to be careful because you know that you cannot guarantee vacant possession. If the tenant contests to leaving, you now have to go through a legal system. The buyer has to attend a hearing. You may have to extend the closing. Your client may incur costs. The board may not even end the tenancy at the very end. So you have to find out what is your intent, buyer. If it's vacant possession, and if you get them to accept vacant possession, then the seller has to proceed, I'm going to say do a cash for keys, and hopefully the tenant accepts so that you can get vacant possession.
they already applied for the court. My purchaser already applied for court, whatever form that they have to submit to be ready for that day,
Mhm.
and in case if they don't move up. But the LTB asked for declaration form.
Yeah, because you need, so if an N12 is served, an application cannot be filed with the board unless there's a declaration.
That application is gonna be dismissed because there's no declaration.
I don't even know if it's, if that application is even filed. You need a declaration in order to file it. The system, the filing system will not allow you to bypass that. You need a declaration in order to file the application.
And I guess at that moment, I should have put a clause to protect my seller to say in case of tenant not moving out, you have to deal with the tenant.
Well, there's already a clause that, clause number 2, the completion date clause. It basically says that the vacant possession will be provided unless unless otherwise included in Schedule A. So if your client, who are you representing?
Seller.
Right, so if your seller did not change that sentence, or if there's no intention of the buyer in Schedule A that's clear, you've guaranteed vacant possession.
But if it comes to that day, like the situation we had back in the days, if the purchaser doesn't stay in the deal to go to the court and they still come with us, and they want to say we're out because now it's a closing date, your tenant didn't move out, I want my money back, or I'm gonna come after you and sue you because I encountered so many damages because of
Mhm.
the situation you caused. How could I ignore this? How could I come up with something that this wouldn't happen?
You need to make the intention of the buyer clear.
Would I accept the whole vacant possession?
You already accepted an offer, right?
No, I know, but what could I have done different?
But what you could have, yeah, make sure you know what the intention of the buyer is and use the appropriate clause. If the intention of the buyer is to move in, you use that VACO1 clause that buyer directs the seller to serve the N12 because they require possession. If the intention of the buyer is vacant possession because they want to renovate and flip, then you have to use that clause. But your client also has to know that there's a risk. If we accept an offer guaranteeing vacant possession and we're not able to deliver, there's
Why not?
financial risk. It won't close and you're going to have to pay penalties.
The clause will protect the seller, because it says that if the buyer lies, then the
Mhm.
buyer is liable. The same clause.
That's
if the buyer
correct.
liable. Saying they don't live in and rent it out, they're responsible.
You got it.
After that,
Go after them.
Go after-
Go after them.
Yeah.
so I have the 11 and the 12 signed for that date. Like, for the exact date of closing, and 11 and then 12, actually, and 11 is signed. That we don't have to pay them, they're mutually agreeing that the tenant is gonna move out that day. Is that, I guess, that's strong enough?
It is, yeah, but you just said that the tenant doesn't want to leave.
No, say in case if it doesn't move out that day.
So the N11 is signed?
Yeah.
The N11 should be filed with the board.
They're, I guess, legal team.
Okay.
Fine with our.
Yeah.
10-11 is the paper. If the guy doesn't move out, then he's.
You enforce an eviction.
Then till they.
Just go to the house and move.
No.
Get him out.
Take the front door off.
Yeah, just go, yeah, just get out.
Pick somebody to take.
Yeah, just bring Hamid over there, you'll be fine. I've got, oh yeah,
Going back to the scope of work, for the agent, on the lease agreement, it says for listing and marketing the property. But on the MLS listing under brokerage, to be marked, it's asked, the final letter that you say that might be complicated because of discrimination.
It should say income, proof of
Exactly,
income.
say the final letter, but it's yes or no, and also deposit required, credit check and all that, so who does that part pertains to the landlord that has to approve and, review and approve, or that's agent responsibility that has to do it?
I think that's what she's saying. You can collect the information, but give it to the landlord and let them do the digging.
Just action for the agent.
Yeah, like you can collect it from the listing agent, ask for the docs, and then the landlord can do it.
Is it legal to ask for deposit?
Only 1 month's rent, and that's applied to the last month's rent.
Not a damage deposit.
Not a
That's
damage
not-
deposit.
Consider as deposit, it's a first and last month, right?
First month's rent is not really a deposit.
In our terms, I guess it's a
That's right.
deposit.
It's common practice because the commission gets deducted from the first and last month, and then the balance is given. But legally, you can only collect a last month's deposit equal to 1 month's rent and apply to the last month of the
It's
tenancy.
last month rent, not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last month's rent deposit.
Some provinces let you have a security deposit or like a damage deposit, like Nova Scotia. You pay a damage deposit. They don't do that here. And then you get it back if you didn't damage the unit.
Damage deposit, that legal or-
Oh, illegal. Only not in Ontario. Key
Only
deposit.
I represent a lot of tenants. And in order to get accepted, sometimes the newcomer to Canada. So I go to the agent is like, you know what, I agree that we dealt before, I trust you, but I want 1 year upfront. Realistically, you write down they say write down tenant voluntarily, which is illegal, I know that. And I tell my tenant, I just want to make sure that this is correct advice. I said, we write down tenant voluntarily offering 1 year upfront, but if you're not happy, go a day after closing, go to
Oh my
LCD.
God.
And then you can actually go after them, say, listen, you forced me to accept this, even though I wrote down tenant voluntarily. Is that correct?
So you can't use certain words to circumvent the act. Number one.
But they're forcing me to say, write this sentence down. Is that
Well,
correct?
no, because it also, that's number one. Number two, when you tell someone, write this, agree to this, but then you can go to the board and get a refund. It speaks to your, I don't want to say
Sketchy.
Yeah.
incompetence. I'm going
No,
to
because
say.
he said, I heard this is illegal. I said, you know what, by all means, I said, first and last is illegal, anything else is illegal.
Yeah.
I'm not the board, but you could try it and go there. It's not my job. You could go find them.
I wouldn't.
So here,
Clear.
Yeah.
just so everybody understands here, okay? You're saying here, so just for everybody else here, if the tenant volunteers gives 12 months up front, there's no problem with that at all.
A complete volunteer or forced to
No,
volunteer?
but let me just, no, let's say you get an offer, from somebody and you say, I don't like them, I'm gonna sign it back and say that 10 volunteers get 12 months. Is that a volunteer? No.
If we-
They were told.
Never offered. Put it in the agreement and send it to them, it's not voluntary, it's.
If it comes from the landlord, correct?
Yeah.
If it comes from landlord,
If
then
it goes from the tenant, it's a different story, but if the landlord signed it back, it's only voluntary for 12 months. No, then, they didn't volunteer. did they?
But is that true? Like, even if you write that yourself as a tenant to offer them, can you go to the court and fight it?
You can.
And you gotta pay.
That's going to be up to the board. But
Have you had a case like that? What is the
No.
court decision?
I usually say agents don't do it.
Just stick to the law.
Just stick to the law, stick to, okay, so even asking for 1 year upfront.
Yeah.
What's that gonna do? Your rent, you still have to collect rent in month number 13 or month number 12.
True, but at least the first year, they kind of like in a.
So you're-
position.
So if the tenant doesn't pay after the first year, I mean, is it not better for you to find a tenant that can pay consistently? Maybe
As
they
income.
can't give you 1 year upfront, but they've paid consistently in the last 5 years. And usually past performance can indicate your future performance. So in my opinion, I would look for someone who's paid consistently in the past
Rather than-
rather than get 1 year upfront. Voluntarily prepaid rent, none of those terms
And
will
then this
save you.
garnishing the wage when they don't pay and go after the tenant. We try to do that, but it seems like one of these tenants that my client was dealing with. Actually, your firm helped us to do this. We went after the company that we're working with and they said, sorry, this guy doesn't work for us no longer.
He
And
quit his
what's the
job.
next solution to garnish the wage? They said you have to find out where he works.
Yeah.
But good luck doing that because how are you gonna find out
Well, no, they're supposed to bring that guy into court. You do disobey, bring the tenant into court. So of course, it's for court, it's contempt of court, there's all kinds of legal things.
He never showed up the first place, so we're kicking him out.
And they never put a bench warrant out for his arrest.
And did you hear what happened? We kicked him out. Sheriff came in after 2 months. He jumped in from the window. He came the day after to the place. So they climbed up to.
I didn't hear that.
They called the police. They waited 12 hours for the cops to show up this time.
Gosh.
Exactly.
Okay, I've got another
think so, yeah.
question. Blocking out sections on bank statements, is that fine? The listing agent won't get concerned? Is that a concern if they black it out?
Not to me, no.
Okay, what is your process like when representing the tenant? What? Would you include smoking? Yeah, you would include smoking questions during the pre-qualification.
100%.
Yeah. I think I know which one he's talking about. They always come to us too. Then they go. I have a tenant that landlord at the end of terms went to the unit, the basement, without permission and threw out all the tenant's stuff, and he ran away and changed the lock as well. And the tenant called the police and they said they cannot do anything. Question, do you represent the tenant? Or what should the tenant do?
So, no, we don't represent tenants. We represent landlords. The tenant would have to call the landlord and tenant board for guidance.
Okay. This is a long one. Does anyone here have questions while I read this? I'll read it first before I ask it.
I have a tenant, that I'm providing internet for in the unit. But I never wrote it into the lease, I just did it as a friend did. I like doing that, and then for homes, I like to do lawn care and driveway. I never write them in the lease, but I do. And my thought process behind that is, I don't want to write it into the lease. It's almost something, it's a little lever I have. If they stop paying rent or whatever, my punishment, the first layer of punishment is, I'm pulling it back. I'm not obligated to give it to you. It's not written in there. I've done it voluntarily. So I'm pulling that perp. Let's talk. Because I've provided it legally, have I established something where now I can be punished for pulling it back?
It may be that it's implied that you are providing this as a service. Even if it's not in a lease agreement, if you provide it, they've used it for X amount of time, and you say, I'm pulling back. If they were to file an application with the board, it would be the board who determines whether or not you have to continue providing that service.
Okay, but it's not automatic.
It's up
They've
to the
got
board.
to-
Now, there's a lot of case law that says that landlords, if you pull back from something that you've provided, and it's implied that you will continue to provide, you will be ordered to provide. In fact, if it goes to the board, it's not as simple as give them back their internet. No, it's tenant incurred costs. So they went to another internet provider. They incurred $80 per month for 5 months, whatever the case is. You now owe them those costs. Those were the damages that they incurred as a result of you pulling back.
That's okay. I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure it's not up, because now I have the voice to say, pay me rent.
Yeah,
Let's
but
talk.
your voice is not very loud in this case.
And if we're in a hearing, LTV hearing, I mean, I do have a voice, I have a forum at that stage to open up the door, because I'll have my report in too, right? I mean, it would be a discussion. Be asked, why'd you pull it back? These guys are in arrears, X dollars.
Right. Okay, so I'm glad you said that. There's an application for non-payment of rent. If your tenant is not paying rent, go file that application,
100%, that,
right?
yeah, that's a given.
But the why you stop pulling back the internet because they stop paying the rent is not going to be a strong position.
So the question, in case someone doesn't ask the same question, when we're advertising for people, can we state things like students only or females only or?
Okay, so let me explain. So you can and you can't. If you can, in the sense that, let's say, for example, Katelyn's living in her house. Okay, she's got 3 bedrooms and she's looking for female roommates. Because she's living in that house, she can say, looking for female roommates. Okay. But if she's renting the basement is a secondary unit. It has its own kitchen, it has its own bathroom. She can't say looking for a female tenant to rent basement. Only if she's looking for a quote unquote roommate.
Same thing with no students.
Students is a little iffier. I would say, no, you can't say I'm looking for students because what does that mean? College student?
Or no student.
No, you can't say.
I guess you can just reject them if
I
they
mean, you're gonna have to have a factual reason rejecting them.
in rejections on that point. Should you be telling the list or the tenant's agent why you rejected them, or can you just say we're rejecting?
You
Just to protect yourself,
That's a
don't
great
say
reason.
why. Like, can you just say you're just rejected?
you have to provide a reason.
You do have to.
Yes, because if you don't, and the other side says, well, I have good credit. Me and my husband are professionals. We make six figures. Is it because I'm a different skin color? Is it because I wear a hijab? What is it?
What if
And
it's
then-
because they have a bad credit score?
Well,
Can you
it's-
just say
so
straight up, you have a
Absolutely.
bad credit score? Okay.
If you're going to reject based on facts. Because if we ever go to the Human Rights Tribunal and the Human Rights Tribunal says, hey, Katelyn, they look good on paper, I'm gonna order you to provide a reason.
I mean, just touch it. One of the agents for the landlord will ask for photo ID along with
Photo IDs.
photo ID. People.
No, it's not. Do not ask for photo
Why
ID.
I get so mad with that.
Yes.
Those pictures, which addresses what you just talked.
I've
Absolutely.
had landlords ask for a photo.
It should be banned.
It should be. Now, I understand why we ask for photo ID. I get it. You want to know who's living in the
Safety.
property, safety, all of that. I know that you require that information to be on your FinTrack forms. I get it. But it's very, very dangerous if you're rejecting that person. Do not ask for photo ID.
But it happens quite often, though, but what do you say, this is what do you do?
It happens a lot.
Drops a lot. It's
I mean,
Yeah,
they
it
can't
is.
reject that person
Yeah.
Simply because of that.
And it's like a picky thing because you want the tenant to get the property. So you're like, I'll just give you the ID, but you also know you're not allowed to ask it. So it's a very like weird line out there on the streets. Mhm.
You see, you never know how the other side is going to react when you reject them. Right? Stick to what you can legally, lawfully ask for. You might not have a problem, but then you might come across the wrong prospect, and that tenant will say, well, why? I need to know why.
Well, if it's like a two-bedroom condo, right, there's a little person right behind the one, another, tenant for the other one. So what if the tenant says, okay, I only want to.
That's what he was saying.
Yeah, I just answered that question.
Yeah.
Yes. So if it's a roommate situation
Yeah.
and you're sharing facilities,
Right.
then yes, you can ask. Yeah. Because the act wouldn't apply anyways,
Exactly.
right?
Going back to the no student, if we don't put on the listing saying that, no student, but when they come, the landlord not really want them to student because of that experience. Would these, bad experiences be legitimate, they be acceptable?
So let's define student. What's your definition of student?
No job, not in school, being support, by.
So no job doesn't mean no that they're a student.
They are full-time student,
Okay,
they don't have any income.
okay.
The money come from parents or relatives. Really like, students.
Okay, so if I was a tenant, okay, and I had a job, a full-time job, and then I said, you know what, I'm gonna go back to school, and my OSAP is going to cover my rent for 6 months, right? So it's no different.
The difference is when he's full-time student, no, cannot verify that no income, of course, you cannot find like that. People employ them, they don't have relative,
Okay.
they have the parent.
So if they don't have any income,
No,
Then
they
you're-
have-
right,
From the
where they have
parents.
family support. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
So, and then they didn't pay rent on time, you go there, they check and you got it, and then you get paid really messy, and then.
Anyone can make a place messy.
Really. Okay, anyway, after the move out, and then we rent it again. So
Yep.
because all the bad experiences, so like the landlord prefer not to take in this kind of student, full-time student, not like they have a job, they have,
The landlord is opening themselves up to liability.
well, we do have a choice to pick our tenant, is it correct? Okay, I think my property.
If you're going to, you're right, it is your property, but when you're renting it out, you give up a little bit of control because the Residential Tenancies Act says you cannot discriminate. In your lease agreement, it says you cannot discriminate.
Before I take that, I have a choice to make. Okay, after I said that, I won't discriminate that with all of my tenants. Okay, but before that, I still have my choice. 1, 2, 3, everything. I can pick one. So I pick the one with strong students.
Good luck.
Yeah.
She's just giving you the law.
I'm just telling you what the law is. And I'm also telling you that going to the board or to the Human Rights Tribunal and saying it's my property and I can do what I want, I can choose the person I want. Good luck. You better have really good counsel. Because that's not gonna help you.
Answer, right? You don't tell somebody they didn't pick these people because they're students, they didn't tell you somebody else was more acceptable.
Someone was more qualified.
Student, you don't have a job?
Somebody else was more acceptable, they weren't getting much.
This question, sorry, is this okay? There's a property on the market right now for sale and for rent. They submitted an offer for rent, but the sellers want to sell instead of rent. I think they're just testing the market. This happens a lot. Are they allowed to do that, basically?
This is a question for,
Like,
Claire.
so the property's on the market for sale and for rent. Our agent put the offer in for the tenant. The listing agent said, sorry, we actually prefer to sell. So they said, no, is that allowed? They'd rather sell than rent it. So they probably still want to hold some hope that it's going to sell.
Why is that?
why is this for?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people do it.
Why
but
they reject that?
yeah. Is it legal? Yeah. They're just saying if it's legal. So yeah, you're
Well-
right. They're probably rejecting the tenant.
So I'm just gonna dive off of what Claire said, is that's exactly the question that it will be asked.
Why is it on?
Why
for
is
rent?
it for lease if your intent is to sell? Are you using that as a loophole to reject?
Mhm. Oh, true.
It's your cool feet, too. We don't like your tenants, so not, no.
Like maybe if it was a well-qualified tenant, maybe they would consider it. So maybe they're just rejecting the tenant in general and waiting for a better one. Okay.
From them to just reject that tenant because you don't want them as a landlord. What's wrong
Wait.
with that?
If you're going to reject them, you should do so factually.
Credit score sucks, no income.
Well,
It-
why? The law has no heartstrings. Just because
It's true. That's a good one. The
Just
law
be-
has no
yeah, there's
heartstrings.
Just because you don't get the warm and fuzzies about dear Caitlin here, doesn't mean that you can reject her. Now, if she doesn't have a job, well, yeah, how are you gonna pay the rent?
Reject.
Reject. If her credit score has bankruptcy on it, like,
But if you're rejecting just because, yeah, you don't feel good about it, that's,
yeah.
yeah, but it's against the law.
Have you ever been to the Human Rights Tribunal?
It's really,
That's one tribunal you want to stay away from.
because they could just say, yeah, they didn't like me because of my color.
Yeah, my skin color, my family status, my sex, my creed, whatever the case is.
Yeah, literally, strike parties.
And whatever, and the credit score is good, job is there and all that stuff. What would be legally the right wording, to nicely, politely, professionally reject that applicant?
I can't provide you legal advice. That's,
I mean, certain times,
No, you just said that, the credit score is good. Whose opinion is that?
well, let's say they're all,
My landlord decides whether the credit score is good, not me.
It's not good enough for them.
Not good enough for me. I don't care if it's 750. It's not good enough. For
They're
me.
looking for eights.
You guys don't have tenants saying the credit score is no good for the tenant? But that's usually one of the reasons why they reject, really.
so if the other party is questioning it, then
So my client's not comfortable with the credit score.
that's it.
Yeah.
Even though if it's 800.
So it's not us to decide what makes them comfortable.
but you can't say that they're not comfortable with this person. Well, why? You need to give them the why.
They've worked long enough at the job. We've been there for 2 years. They've only been-
And if you dig deeper into the paperwork, you may find the why. Right?
You know, I have a landlord that is very picky about the race of the tenants.
Where were you for the last 5 minutes? Where did you go? We just talked about it. You can't reject someone based off their race.
No, I'm saying, how do you even ask that question from the other side?
You don't. You don't.
What do you want to ask? What's the
Like, where they're
background?
from.
What does that matter?
Tell the Asian client that what does it matter?
Human rights.
Oh, what does it matter?
They're,
Human rights, go.
Yeah, that's a huge human right.
it is, and I always tell them, and I said, they said they don't care because they wanna know where they're from.
I don't care.
And sometimes I ask the other agent and they're like, they say the same thing, what does it matter? They just said, oh, the last name looks familiar, I just wanna know where they're from.
Oh my God.
That's just like opening up a case right there. It happens a lot.
This does
Oh,
happen.
she knows.
It does happen. This is not
No.
unusual. It does happen. You have to be careful. If you can say, well, what does it really matter? Is that the process of is that required when you're
They don't want
considering the
certain race in their
application?
house. Nothing in my control.
Yeah.
That's what they want. But I mean, I told them you playing with a very bad.
I mean, you could answer the question. But once you tell them that information, if that
Mm-mm.
gets rejected, your clients can pursue an application through the Human Rights Tribunal
I know.
as a result of maybe that was the reason. But it does happen.
Your job is to gather the information.
Yeah.
Send it to your seller rejects it, not rejecting, you're not protecting your seller, you can go back and guy rejects it, I don't want.
So they asked them where they're from. And
No, 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 no.
No, no.
No,
No, you take. You got your-
He is good insurance, right?
I hope so.
But it's
I
not
hope
saying
so.
which that he wants, like where you from, can you ask?
No,
No, I can't.
no, I can't.
Not loud.
No. Yeah, there's a couple. Which ones are you on?
1 year lease. The landlord hasn't decided to sell only after 4 months of the tenant. Tenants have to move once if they will give it 2 months notice, or the tenant stays till the end of the lease, no matter even if they.
So the lease has to be honored
For 1 year.
or cash for keys.
So the new buyer would have to assume
Correct.
that.
Or they can mutually agree to end the tenancy.
How about newcomers with job visas? How can we make sure they're reliable tenants?
That's a good question.
Proof
Yeah.
of funds.
Proof of funds. Or sometimes different countries, like we had a tenant move in from Switzerland and they provided a credit report from Switzerland. So sometimes different countries have their own credit rating system.
I know my guys just asked for bank statements and proof of funds in that case. And employment letters, I guess, but even that doesn't really do it.
Yeah.
Nelson, I get this quite often, probably feels like, or maybe already asked the question, but we get guys that want to list their properties, as tenant. And when I give the client, when I give the tenant notice because the property is, because the client's selling the property. That's why they want to get notice, right? So just reiterate the place.
So if a landlord wants to sell a property and there is a lease, they have to honor the lease. If there is no lease and the intent is to sell, there's no notice that exists to provide to the tenant that the landlord has an intention to sell, right? The landlord has two options. They can either list with the tenant and sell, and once the property is sold firm and they know what the intention of the buyer is, then a notice, an N12 notice can be served for the new purchaser's own use. If the tenant doesn't move out, which they have the right not to move out, the landlord will have to commence a legal proceeding. A hearing will have to be held. The buyer will have to attend and testify, and then the board will make a decision, which is not a guarantee that the tenancy will come to an end. Because if the board finds that the purchaser does not have an intent to occupy, they will not end the tenancy. Alternatively, there's always a mutual agreement to end the tenancy via cash for keys, which the parties can mutually agree to end the tenancy, whether or not a lease exists.
Does it make a difference if it's a 1 year lease term or month-to-month lease?
If they mutually agree to end the tenancy, it doesn't matter if they're in a 1 year lease or if they're within their 4 months.
Does it make it easier for the landlord if it's monthly lease?
Always, always.
So when they're selling, they just give them the notice and they have to be.
Only if the new purchaser has the intent
they're
to
not
occupy.
assuming.
If
You're not assuming that.
they want to move in.
Let me clear your question. So can't not, just because you list a problem, you're not giving the tenant notice to leave.
Yeah.
Just because it's listed means nothing.
That notice doesn't exist, giving the tenant notice to leave.
You're the only time you get notice when you sell it.
You got it.
The buyer wants it for their own use, then you give it.
After the offer is accepted.
Unless they mutually agree.
Exactly, if you don't tell the tenant. People knock on his door to show his property. What do you do?
Yeah.
So you have to have that discussion, but as far as the legal stuff goes.
Correct.
If you do cash for key, and then you agree on certain amount, you get the key, the tenant moves out. You ended up having the property vacant, there's no indication anywhere that the property is rented after that. But I get a letter from the court that, hey, there was a bad faith. I suspect that you rented that property again. How do you fight that?
Well, that depends on the conversations and why the tenancy came to an end. If there was discussions prior to cash for keys that the landlord wants to sell, and that tenancy came to an end, the parties agreed via cash for keys because the landlord intended to sell. That tenancy came to an end because the landlord intended to sell, and the tenant vacated and the landlord re-rented. The tenant may have a claim, even though an N12 doesn't exist. We call these the spirit of an N12 hearings. And then that'll be up to the board to decide.
The question was, it's cash for keys.
Yes,
Pay the guy cash the keys, leave, then he still rented it out.
right. So
They rented that, but there's no indication of anywhere renting it. It's just, I give it to the cousin.
No, that's fine, but the question, the question not.
What's the real question?
what's, yeah,
What's the real question?
that depends on what why the tenancy came to an end. If there were no discussions of the landlord wanting to move in or sell, and there was cash for keys, landlord can do whatever they want.
I want to sell the place, once you leave, here's money to leave.
And then the tenant says, I want to sign, I don't want to interfere, I leave.
Gets his money, and then that wasn't intention, intention was rented out at a higher price,
Higher
Right.
price, yeah.
The tenant may have a claim.
even though we got cash for keys.
You got it.
But
That's gonna be up to the board.
Answer that, please.
I don't know. We've been to the board many times. Remember, when you go to the board, it's up to the member to decide. But I encourage everybody here to attend these Spirit of N12 hearings.
You can go to those.
Absolutely. Send me an
That's our
email,
next
I'll
field
give you
trip. Our next
yeah.
field trips to court,
I'll send
everybody.
you, I'll send you a link.
That'd be so, that would actually be fun.
It depends. Remember, every
whole lot.
board is
That'd be-
virtual.
We're all going to
It
court. Let's
depends
go.
on those conversations that led to the
The
termination.
client was mentioning that, hey, I'm getting divorced from my wife and I'm going to that place.
Mhm.
That we agree on cash for key, and then you get a letter from LTP that, hey, we suspect that it was bad faith, he rented to somebody else. And then
Now you have to defend this application.
you have to prove it that you were leaving there.
That's right.
And prove it to leave there, you say, let's say I'm having one afternoon, but the other bedrooms, of course, I rented to a family because I could not pay for the whole house.
Mhm.
That's up to the judge.
That's gonna be up to the board to decide.
But it's a big fine, no? It's 25,000.
35. And now they're increasing the monetary jurisdiction of the small claims court and landlord tenant board up to 50,000.
Wow. And if you say you don't have, like, you can't say.
You need a good legal rep on your team.
Not you. Sorry, you said, getting your slides.
Absolutely. She'll send them.
Can I send that one that you sent me?
Mhm.
Okay, I already have it. I think that's all the questions online. Is that good? Okay. Thanks, Gita.
Thank you, guys. Again,
Thank you.
if you ever have any questions, reach out. Happy to help.
We reach out a lot.
That's good.
Awesome. We'll see you later, online crew.
Perfect.